The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of their institutions, employers, or affiliates. This content is for informational and discussion purposes only and should not be taken as official policy, guidance, or advice. Hello, welcome to episode number 4 of our podcast, AI on the Quad. We're talking with thought leaders and trailblazers about how AI is impacting and transforming education. I'm your co-host, Phil Spitzy.
And I'm your co-host, Andy Tynes, and we are excited to welcome Jenny Corvo to the podcast. For the audience who may not know you, Jenny, can you please just kind of give us an overview of your current role and some of the other things that you're involved in from an AI standpoint?
Yeah, sure. So my main role is the Director of Knowledge at Singularity University, which is an executive education organization out in Silicon Valley. So I'm working knowledge management there, but I also am an AI expert there and work with executives on implementing AI, right? But I also work at the University of North Florida in the Professional and Lifelong Learning Department, which is the continuing education department. So I essentially developed the first professional certificate program in the region for practical AI uses, right? So not the technical side of AI, but actually like how to use ChatGPT, which was a big question at the time when I developed the certificate. So I teach 7 courses. Technically, I guess it's 14 because I do both in person and online of the same course. So I teach a lot of courses on AI at UNF. And then, I also do some speaking engagements. I've been on an ethics panel at UNF, and I've done a few things here and there, guest lectures in classrooms and that sort of thing. I have a lot of different touch points with AI, not just always as an educator. I also am married to a fine arts professor, right? So I'm married to faculty in a space where AI can be sort of contested in a lot of ways, especially the creative arts space. There's a sort of an ongoing tense conversation. And then a year ago, I decided to go and get my master's degree. So I'm also a grad student at the university. So it have a few different touch points with AI in my life for sure.
Wow, well, what do you do with all that spare time you have, huh?
Yeah, I crochet. Yeah, I do a lot of crocheting. Believe it or not, at night I crochet.
I've actually heard that's very soothing. I've been told to take it up. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I get that.
This is perfect. And one of the reasons that I'm super excited to talk with you and have you as a guest on the podcast is because you are actually teaching AI. It's not necessarily a more traditional faculty member trying to integrate AI. You're actually a step ahead and you're teaching the use and the tools and such. So I guess start by just kind of sharing with us how you got into that place, how that evolution kind of occurred. And what might be fun is just to hear, how do you explain to others what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the generative AI space hasn't been around very long, right? And I've sort of been in it for 5 years, which is the early days before commercially available applications. I was running Python code and generating images and doing all that fun stuff, and then was an alpha and beta tester for some commercial applications. And I was very excited about all of that and was having a lot of different conversations about what I was doing. And people were very curious. They were like, how do you do that? I want to learn. And since I'm a natural educator, I said, you know what, there should be courses on this. And at the time, this is, 2022, there were not a lot of courses at all. So I started doing some speaking engagements, little like workshops here and there. And then I approached the University of North Florida because I knew they had a continuing education department. And I said, hey, why don't you offer some professional certificates in AI? I'd be happy to teach those classes. And so we started with 1 class and now I'm up to 7. So I just saw really a need of like a lot of people said, what is this AI stuff? A lot of people were curious, like like I said, how to use ChatGPT, how to generate images. There were a lot of curiosities that I was happy to help people figure out. And so it's been a really fun and exciting space because, of course, now pretty much everyone's used ChatGPT at this point. So now my education has evolved a lot to helping people understand both the capabilities and the limitations of the tools, and also what tools to use and developing workflows. And so it's really exciting to sort of evolve my lessons as time is continuing to go on and people have more experience.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. What would you say is your favorite AI course to teach right now?
So my favorite is probably, I have a course called Creators Foundation, so I have two professional certificates. One's called the Professional Certificate and the other is called the Creators Certificate. So more of a creative bent. And the foundational course in that certificate program is really exciting because it teaches people how to think creatively using AI tools. And so the students that come in there often are people who would not consider themselves creative, right? I teach a lot of people who are retired from the tech industry or either like late career in some tech adjacent field. And they just consider themselves very analytical. They've never written a story. They've never drawn a piece of art. They're like, I can only draw stick figures, right? So they're super like not creative people, and self-admitted. And so I take them through these journeys of like, how do you generate images? How do you write a story? How do you use AI as a creative collaborator? By the end of the 6 weeks, they create like a 90-second animation. A lot of students will create a trailer. Some will create like a narrated storybook. And every time they are always so proud of themselves. Like it's a frustrating journey. It's not easy. And they have to work really hard at it, but then they're just so proud and impressed with themselves. And it's just always, it's so delightful. And it's a very energetic and exciting class. So that's definitely my favorite out of all of them. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I would have thought the opposite. I would have thought that the creative types were like, okay, now let's figure out how to use AI so I can be even more creative and on the leading edge. So, but you're saying it's the opposite, which
Oh,
I,
yeah.
if I think about it, it makes sense. It's just I'm a little surprised that those analytic types are like, hey, here's my chance to finally be creative because I can get some help. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
No, it's great. I actually think my experience has been that creative people are quite resistant to AI. It almost feels like AI is sort of like, this is my territory. You can't be creative. That's my thing, right? And then there's, of course, a lot of like ethical concerns that come up in those conversations when you work with artists and creatives in regards to AI. So yeah, I feel a lot of hesitancy actually from creative people. I've actually only had one creative student. All of my students have been analytical tech people.
Wow.
And the one creative student I had is like an international bestseller, award-winning author. And she wanted to turn her previous work into animated shorts, which is actually a very difficult task with AI. That's not actually something AI is really good at. You have to work really hard to take something original like that and animate it. But for people who have never really had that spark of creativity, AI seems to like unlock that door. It seems to sort of, I've said in the past, it democratizes creativity. Like it fills in the blank canvas and suddenly you're seeing your ideas on the screen. And that's really empowering for a lot of people. Yeah.
That's really cool and interesting.
Yeah, I could actually see an analogy almost to the kind of the sip and paint, type events that you can sign up for where somebody walks you through, Bob Ross style, creating a painting that you get to go home with. And AI becomes that mentor, if you will, or that class leader, right?
Yeah, it does. Funny enough, my husband, who's the fine art professor, we met at a paint and sip. We were both instructors. So we were instructors at a paint and sip because I'm also an artist. You'll see an unfinished piece hanging on the wall behind me because I have no other space for it because it's a large painting. So that's where we met.
Wow,
that's great.
Cool.
That's great.
All right. Well, shifting gears just a tad. So let's talk about assessments. Assessments in the age of AI. It's kind of a hot topic right now. So, from your viewpoint as an instructor, what kind of assignments or assessments lend themselves well to AI use, and which don't?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, from my space as the courses I teach, I'm teaching people how to use AI, right? And for those use cases, which I don't, there's not a lot of people doing that. So that's like a pretty limited use case. But for my use case, of course, I'm creating assignments where I'm asking students to come up against the limitations of AI. I'm like intentionally frustrating them. I'm trying to make them do things that AI can't do so that they are then forced to understand its limitations and that AI really is an augmentation tool, not a human replacement tool. And so I'm making them confront that. And I think for my use case, obviously, that makes sense, but I don't think that use case would be foreign in any sort of other classroom as well. I mean, I think approaching the capabilities and limitations of an AI tool in a standard higher ed classroom, no matter the department, I think could be really interesting. I think, experimentation, experimenting with AI and understanding, for example, I mean, writing's a big one, right? We talk about like ChatGPT is writing essays for students, and this is terrible. And right, students shouldn't be turning in essays written by ChatGPT. First of all, they're not good. And second of all, you haven't learned anything. You haven't achieved the purpose of the assignment. So then what do we do with the fact that ChatGPT can write? And I was thinking about how have you seen this wiki article that has like what it identifies AI writing, and it analyzes the aspects of AI writing and how to identify it? It's huge. There's enormous wiki article. They've done so much work on this, and it's a fascinating article to go through and see, like, oh, this is how AI writes, right? And to see those examples. But I think in a higher ed space, what would be really interesting would be to work with a class to analyze why AI writes that way, right? Because if AI is it's a probability engine, right? So it's outputting the average response of everything on the public internet and some on the private internet. Unfortunately, we've learned. But if that's the average response and that's the average output, why is that? And what does that mean for composition? And then what does that mean for AI as a writing tool? What does that mean for you? If you're writing an essay, how then can you use AI ethically? I think those conversations and those sort of experimental assignments and comparative analysis between human output and AI output would be really interesting in an educational space, higher educational space for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I go back to one of our previous guests who talked about the human sandwich. So you start with a human generating input. You've got AI in the middle, and then you have the human at the other end, the other side of the sandwich, validating, verifying, polishing, right?
Yeah.
So you're kind of headed down that same path with what can they start with?
Yep.
What are they going to get back, and then what do they do with it again? Yeah.
Yeah, yep. I like that idea. Yeah, I think sometimes maybe an open face sandwich though is beneficial, right? Because I think AI is really great at filling in the space, right? Taking away that blank canvas, taking away the blank page, just filling the space. And then you as a human can do what you want with that. You can iterate on it. You can, collaborate then with AI on whatever that output is. But sometimes I think what I've encountered over and over again with my students is that they just don't know what to put into AI. Right? Like they've heard all the hype, they understand what it can do, but then when they encounter it, it's like, okay, I don't know how to start this conversation. So sometimes I'm just like, just start it. In fact, have AI ask you what to do, just to start the conversation. And then that sort of like opens up doors. So sometimes maybe I think an open face sandwich is in some cases, maybe a better way to get into AI. Yeah.
Yeah. I went through that exact exercise because I had effectively a little coding project that I wanted to attempt, but I'm not a coder.
Right.
And I said, what can you do? How can you help? And it gave me, I can do this outline and I can give you this. And I finally just said, can you write the code? Sure.
Yeah.
And it dumped me out a Python file, and I learned how to install and configure Python and run it, and then go back and, figure out where it broke and where it missed something, that I had asked for, and just kind of iterate through that. And at the end, I was like, oh, I've got a Python app. This is great.
Nice.
And never wrote a line of code in my life.
Yeah.
So that really just kind of like you said, it took away that blank canvas because it gave me something to start with.
Yeah. And then it became a learning experience, right? Then you learned something. I think there's a ton of opportunity for education in AI, from learning from AI, just from that experience, that sort of experience where you're just like, what can you do? Now do it. Now tell me what to do. And then you're learning via experience. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting comment about just look at it as a blank page that allows you to get started. That was kind of one of our next questions was, what's the biggest benefit that AI can bring to students right now? And would you say that in some cases it lets you get started?
Yeah, I think, certainly getting started is a great benefit. I also think that AI can be, I'm thinking, because I'm in grad school right now, right? And grad school is very, at least in the humanities, is very conversation based. You're just constantly engaging with theoretical conversations with other students, and that's the whole thing. And what I've noticed is that sometimes in our conversations, we get a little stuck, right? Like we reach the limits of what we don't know. And a lot of times I think, wow, wouldn't it be beneficial if we could have AI enter this conversation, even if it's just in a Socratic way, to help us think more clearly and engage with different questions, and even debate what the AI is saying, but just to sort of not just start an idea, but take ideas even further past the limits of what we're hitting. Because, as when you're exhausted and you're in this sort of theoretical conversation, you hit a wall and you really can't go past that. You can't force yourself to go past it, and you just need a little spark sometimes. And I think AI could be really beneficial in that capacity as well. I mean, I think even if it's just filling in the blank page or boosting a conversation, the idea here is that AI is becoming a thought partner and becoming a collaborator and helping you do what you already do well, helping you do that better, or maybe helping you do something that you don't do very well. For example, write lines of Python code, helping you learn how to do that, right? But in no way replacing what you do. So that's always my hesitation, is I think a lot of people want to use AI to write an essay, right? The standard example of ChatGPT writing an essay for a student. And I just don't think that's not beneficial. Right. And that's kind of cheating. But I don't think using it as a brainstorming partner or to get you thinking is cheating. But other faculty would argue with me on that one, for sure.
Well, the reality is, once they get out of school and they're in, if they're in the business world, for example, right? Yep. I mean, you better learn how to use AI in different ways. I mean, I know for one, probably one of the primary ways I use is just to write emails that sometimes I'll write it and then I'll put it can you make this better? Or sometimes I'm like, just, hey, write an email that says these 3 points, right? Because I don't have the time or I don't feel like it. And then I'll take it and make changes to it. But oftentimes I'll write that first iteration before I feed it in, and it's always very complimentary. Oh, good start, Andy. So, right. Which makes me laugh a little bit. But
the sycophantic nature of ChatGPT sometimes is very annoying. And I always try to counter that with my students. I try to give them techniques for reducing that, and they don't ever follow my advice because they actually love the sycophantic nature. They're like, it's so complimentary. And I'm like, oh, I know, but that's just because they want you to use it.
Right.
It's actually a very frustrating place for me. Yeah.
But that is the reality. They are going to use it
Yeah.
later in life once they're outside of school, whatever role they choose. So I think Phil and I, that's one of the reasons we're doing this. We recognize that AI is something that you can't just pretend it's not there. And I think
No.
higher ed institutions, some are pretending it's not there. They don't want to think about it, but most aren't, which is, I think, the right way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think both ends of the conversation can are the extremes are not beneficial, right? Being so pro AI that you're hyping it up and you think that it's a magic thing that's going to solve everything and change the world in all these ways, I think is an extreme view. And then I also think no AI ever is an extreme view, that it's the worst thing that's ever happened, like it's like we're inventing the atomic bomb again. Sometimes the conversations really feel like that. And I don't know that either viewpoint is beneficial. I mean, because they both close the door on the conversation, right? And then you
Right.
can't engage in a conversation if you're hyping it up or you're sensationalizing fear and closing the door, or just holding the door so wide open that you're just, everybody's kind of like, I don't want to, I don't want to have anything to do with you. You're just like a hype man, right? So I think a neutral and realistic conversation without the fear and sensation and hype is really where we need to be in higher education, and I don't think we're there. I think often, at least from my experience, is that you have administrations often being very enthusiastic about AI, of course, because they want to be AI first universities. They want to be enthusiastic about this new technology that's good for them. And then faculty are very hesitant and then close the door. And then it's hard to have conversations. So the conversation and the reality of AI is really important. Yeah.
I will say that it feels to me like this was one of the most shortest lived battles over right versus wrong in the history of higher ed. Because even going back to like January, February of this year, there
Yeah.
was a very clear, there were two sides. I don't run into anybody anymore that is against it completely. They're
Really?
cautious. They're cautious. They want some guidance. They want the administration to kind of hand down the policy before they start using it. But
Yeah.
I mean, even in the past, 9 or 10 months, I've seen this massive shift in that yeah, we're going to have to do this.
Yeah.
We want a little guidance as to how to move forward.
Yeah. That's good. I'm glad you've seen that. I don't know that that's been my experience. I think being in the humanities, I've certainly encountered many faculty who are just anti-AI, and even outside in other industries, in the writing industry, creative writing industry, and fine art industry. There's so much anti-AI, and when you're working in the humanities, you're fielding students into those fields, right? Like that's where they're going to be working, and those fields are not accepting AI. So there still is tension, especially with the humanities. But of course, in business and in tech and other departments, yeah, they're more accepting.
Yeah, that makes
I'm
sense.
really, really looking forward to the Thanksgiving break because I'm going to get to talk with my nephew, who's a junior in college right now, with a major in English, creative writing,
Yep.
and a minor in publishing. And I really want to dig
Oh,
into what's the industry look like from that perspective, right?
wow. Yeah,
Because
I can
that's
tell you as someone who submits to creative writing journals frequently, I write under a pen name because my association with AI prevents me from getting accepted into journals.
wow. Okay.
Wow.
Yes, they are strict. Most publications, creative writing publications at this point, will have a disclaimer on their submissions that says, under no circumstances can you use AI in any part of the writing process.
Wow.
And I can tell you, my husband, as a career fine artist, he was a finalist in a pretty big competition, and he was one of 50 finalists, and they found out that he uses AI to start thinking about his references and creating his references. And he works very hard on those with the help of AI. And they found that out and they disqualified him from the award. Yeah. So it's very contested in the creative industry.
Yeah.
Very much.
Interesting.
I can see that. I can see why there's sensitivity specifically in those areas.
Sure.
So
yeah, I just wish that I wish it could be a conversation. I want to have a conversation with these publications and with these people who are giving fine art awards. I want to be able to have a conversation with them. But it is very closed door. No conversation to be had. Yeah.
No, and I think that'll change with time. It will have to.
Yeah, it will.
I think so.
Because otherwise you're going to end up with, a new publishing house that pops up that invites that kind of work. And they're going to then, they'll eclipse the old school. I think that's just going to be what's going to happen across the board. It's definitely an interesting space to watch.
It is.
I'm going to change up a little bit because I found on one of your online bios that you describe your mission as helping people use Gen AI with confidence. So thinking about students today, faculty members today, what in your mind does genuine AI literacy look like?
Yeah, I think genuine AI literacy is understanding the tool, not at a technical level, right? I mean, you don't have to understand transformers and neural networks, but understanding that AI, at least generative AI, is, well, really all AI, are probability engines, right? And that I want to take away, like I've talked about, the hype and the fear. I don't want to enter in conversations with those in mind, or if they are in mind, I want to bring people to a neutral space. And I think that that's what genuine AI literacy looks like, is understanding because there are risks and harms. This is not like 100% safe, right? So being aware of those, understanding them, understanding how to mitigate risk, and then within that framework, understanding what AI can do, its capabilities, and understanding what it's not great for, and then being able to feel confident about interacting with it within that framework. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like that.
Well, as a follow-up to that, if a faculty member listening wants to dip their toe in this week, what's a simple, low-risk way to bring AI into one assignment without doing a complete redesign of the course?
Sure. I think it certainly depends on the course, right? But if we're talking about, let's say it's a course that requires an essay, I think it would be interesting to have students just generate the essay, openly generate the essay using AI, and then have the students analyze that output. Why is it not very good, right? Why is this not a replacement for you actually writing the essay, right? I think that's a good place to start, is just analyzing AI outputs, and then applying that to whatever, field you're in or course that you're teaching. I don't know. I think that's a good place to start.
So it's applying the critical thinking component of learning at the end versus maybe in the middle or throughout the process. Just like you said, earlier, you said, take away the blank canvas, right?
Yeah.
Right. It could be a history course, write me a 500-word, biography on Abraham Lincoln. I'm looking at a blank page. I'm going to be looking at a blank page for a while. Abraham Lincoln was born on,
right. Right.
It can be a little bit more in depth than that. So have it do that first draft, like you said, go through and well, why did it choose that? What value to the biography does that carry? And fact check it, right? So you're applying all of that kind of critical thinking on something that was AI generated.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that critical thinking is, Boy, I wish that critical thinking was the foundational component of every single course, right? And everything that we learn, because I think it is so fundamental to existing in our world, especially now more than ever. And I feel like when it comes to the AI conversation, both enthusiasm and hesitancy can be examined and resolved through critically assessing the output that AI generates in whatever field. For your example of a history course, yeah, I mean, why do we write essays in history courses? Right? What's the benefit? Why are we doing this? I think looking at AI outputs invites that conversation and invites students to understand how they benefit from writing and how they benefit from research and how they don't benefit from just a standard AI output, right? And then that invites more conversation about how you can use AI ethically within the classroom. Yeah.
And that's yet another data point I've postulated this theory that we're definitely smack dab in the middle of the information age. I think
Right.
we're starting to enter the explanation age where students are craving the why. They may not realize that they're craving the why, but when it's presented to them, things start moving, right? Juices start flowing, questions, curiosity, everything kind of goes into high gear.
Yeah, I like this theory. That's interesting because I think it goes along with the cycle of theory in general, right? Like if you just look like theory as a field, and there's always the development of theories, and then there's the conversations and arguments around those theories. And I would agree with you that we're entering a space where new theories are going to be developed, right? In every field. And yeah, and the why is really how that's the beginning. That's sort of the root of developing those new theories. And yeah, and I think also our pedagogy and really critically analyzing why we teach the way we teach, and if it is in fact beneficial. What are the benefits and disadvantages, and how can we circumvent that in this very technological era where, of course, there are going to be continuous disruptions. I mean, the AI is that's sort of just the beginning of what's about to happen, right?
Yeah. We may not even be at toddler stage yet, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So that opens up, I think, what will be our second to last question here, which is, you mentioned pedagogy, which I think is fantastic. Gaze into your crystal ball, 1, 2, 3 years out.
Yeah.
What does the landscape of education look like?
Yeah.
As it relates to AI, right?
Yeah. It's so difficult to say. It's a very difficult question because who could have anticipated how disruptive AI would be and where we would be now? I think in 1 year, I would hope to see more conversations around, like actual conversations around the ethics of AI beyond just yes or no. So real in-depth conversations. And I think, looking 2-3 years out, I anticipate that we will start to see AI integrated into more curriculum. And we will probably see actual fields of AI as part of, a humanities department, maybe getting a minor in AI, something like that, right? And again, of course, you can always specialize as a computer scientist in AI, but that's not what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about actual like practical applications of utilizing AI. But then who's to say? Because there's plenty of technologies that are just on the verge of disruption. Quantum computing is just always in the back of my mind as like, when is it going to just change everything? And then our AI conversations are going to be very different when quantum computing really enters the space. So that's going to change things. And I don't know if that's 3 years from now. I don't know, because these things happen so fast.
Right. Well, I think that's going to be something interesting to watch is while technology moves quick. Higher ed does not. And that's probably good. That's probably good because they tend, they tend to be very methodical, hopefully very thoughtful. Like you said, lots of conversations. What's the best approach? Where, how, why do we do these different integrations, leverage these different tools? So I think it's going to be really, really fun to watch, just going forward. And I'm sure you're right. We might be having a very different conversation in 2 or 3 years than we ever thought, right?
Yeah. And I think that the speed is interesting because I think the speed is much faster than it used to be. I think we've only had commercial generative AI applications for 3 years. And universities are already instituting policies. I know at my university, there are so many councils and policy conversations. There is a lot going on, even at my university, for integrating AI into the curriculum and how faculty use AI. And so that's only been happening for a short time. So I think as the speed of technology increases and the demand for faster conversations happens, then higher ed will become faster. It will just have to be. Now, bureaucracy, on the other hand, that's
right.
that's never gonna get faster.
Will that ever change?
Right.
Ooh, I don't know. That's a big question, right?
I think even outside of higher ed, at least what I see in the business world is the technology is moving a lot faster than the way people are adopting it, and how to use it.
Yes.
I'm not sure, even if adoption rates accelerate, will it be able to keep up with how the technology changes accelerate?
I mean, at some point it has to plateau, right? And at some point, generative AI can only do what generative AI can do because of the limits of how the technology is built. And we would have to have a new technology for it to do new things, right? There's only so much generative AI can do. So at some point it will plateau. And I think some of the speed is hype, right? I mean, you get these model releases all the time and you talk about benchmarks, and some of this is just marketing and PR. It has no practical effect on real people. Right.
Very, very true. Very true. All right. I guess we've got time for one more question, something a little closer to home. What's the one tool or use case that excites you the most, that you think everyone should, hey, take a look at this and see what you think?
Yeah. So by far, that's NotebookLM. So many people have not heard of NotebookLM. They don't know what to do with it. And it's a free tool. They never use your data to train because it's essentially a closed system tool where you can create your own LLM with it, right? You can upload any amount of information. I mean, it's something like the amount of 300 academic textbooks you could enter into one notebook, and you could have a conversation with those textbooks. You can generate a podcast about the textbooks. You can interact with the podcast hosts, these AI podcast hosts. There's so much you can do. And then everything that you do is cited. So all of the output that you get is immediately linked. You can click on the source and it highlights exactly where it's pulling that information from. So you know that you're avoiding the common hallucination, right, with LLMs. So NotebookLM is just a fit. I've seen so many interesting uses of this tool. I mean, obviously in academic research, I think the use cases are obvious, but I had one student, when I introduced it, she goes, "Oh my God, that would be the best recipe book ever." And I was like, wait, that's such a good idea. If you have 400 recipes, just enter them into this notebook and then say, hey, create a weekly meal plan for me and a grocery list. And it can do that with its enormous amount of sources, which you would never be able to do with something like ChatGPT, right? Because the context window, meaning the short-term memory of ChatGPT, wouldn't allow you to do that without hallucination. So and the fact that the privacy policy means that your data is not being shared, and the fact that it's free. I mean, it's an incredible tool. I'm very excited about NotebookLM and have seen some really cool stuff happen, really cool use cases.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
Yeah,
I've played with it a couple of times. It's fantastic, and I've done 2 things with it so far. So it's just I can't wait to do more. I'm wholly on board with that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. We are sadly at the end of our episode. So, Jenny Lee Corvo, thank you so much for being our guest. We definitely have enjoyed the conversation and insights. Thank you as well to all of our audience for tuning in. This has been the AI on the Quad podcast. And until next time,
Class dismissed.